Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending the KRT board meeting July 25th, 2024. First thing I want to do is introduce a new face at our table, Maurice Anderson. Welcome. Maurice is representing the town of Montgomery. You want to tell us in 15 seconds what your background and?
I don't really have too much background. I just started on the city council.
Oh, good.
So I'll be working on there and with their park board. And so I just started, everything just kind of started July 1st.
Congratulations. Montgomery's always been a big contributor to the effort here, so we appreciate you being here.
There's a lot of people from Montgomery that utilize KRT buses.
Good. We're glad to have your voice at the table. You want to do a roll call for us, Sean?
Yeah, and I've done a solid roll call, but I have 6 of our partner agencies present. I have Kanawha County represented by Todd Goldman, Valerie Gaynor, and Jay Snodgrass electronically. I have Charleston represented by Mr. Tom Tolliver, Heidi Bonnet Adams. I have Bell represented by Mark Doughty. And Dunbar's represented electronically by Larry Bailey, Montgomery by Maurice Anderson, and I have St. Albans by Mr. Bob Sutton. So we have 6 of our 8 partners necessary to have a quorum.
Great. And what did you say about Jean Arthur? Is she on the call?
Is Jean on electronically? Mayor Casebolt?
Casebolt is.
Casebolt is?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Anybody else online, Travis?
Have Larry Bailey and Jay Snodgrass?
Those are the only 3.
Yes.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to look at the June board meeting minutes? They were sent out with a packet if you have any questions or comments. If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the June 2024 minutes. Any further comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, Sean, if you want to do the annual voting rights resolution.
Yes. Well, good morning and welcome to fiscal year 2025 at KRT, and that means we have some administrative duties to take care of before we get into the bulk of our business. Every year we go over our voting rights resolution, which is where the votes on KRT's board are distributed based off of contributions by the different partners at the table. And essentially what that means is every year we add some votes for the contributions from the safety levies in Kanawha County. So last year we had $8,852,183 contributed from the safety levy, which equates to 17,705 more votes for the Kanawha County Commission. And at that point, that means that, get over here the actual votes. Each member of the Kanawha County Commission will now have 135,391 votes. Each member from the city of Charleston has 3 1/3 votes. And St. Albans has 1 vote, South Charleston 1 vote, Montgomery 1 vote, Nitro 1 vote, Dunbar 1 vote, and the town of Bell 1 vote. And those are procedurally $500 equates to 1 vote. And so you just take the safety levy contributions divided by 500. That's what we had to. So.
Okay, so annually we have to adopt this resolution. I can tell you from my time on the board, which goes to 2009, I don't recall that anybody has called for a weighted vote. It could be done, but there's always an effort that those board members that are here, regardless of your representation, that everybody has equal input as the decisions that are made. So it's a formality that we have to go through that. We need a motion to adopt that resolution unless there's any other questions.
As much as it pains me, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Mr. Sutphin and a second by Mr. Tolliver. Bob, I almost called on you because every year you're the guy, I think you said the exact same thing.
You don't want to hear my opinion. It's not the time or place, we'll do it some other.
So the motion on the floor, I want to call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is election of officers. Run down where we stand right now,
Yep.
Sean.
So we have 4 elected officers at on KRT's board. We have a president, which is Mr. Goldman. We have vice president, Valerie Gaynor. We have our treasurer, which is Jean Arthur, and our secretary, which is Heidi Adams.
So that is the current status. Nobody to my knowledge has campaigned, but if those members, Any members open to make a recommendation? We can start doing them individually for president, or do as the board chooses. This seat is very comfortable, by the way. It's different than the rest of yours.
We recommend as is.
Second.
Okay, so if I understand Mr. Tolliver, he is recommending that the current slate of officers remain the same, and Mr. Sutton has seconded that. Are those members that are here, that are in those positions, willing to accept those positions?
Yes.
And Jean is, I guess, nominated by not being here. Okay, so that is are there any further comments about that motion by Mr. Tolliver? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. I appreciate your all's support. I think that the folks that are in those positions serve you well, and appreciate your support and the work that is going on. Next will be.
I was just going to ask also, each one of you should have an oath of office and a conflict of interest statement in front of you. If you please sign that at some point during today's meeting, and I will collect those after the meeting. Thank you.
Next is Jessica on the financial statements.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. Happy fiscal new year. I want to start by going over Schedule 2 a little bit, the statement of revenues and expenses. You'll see this month our operating expenses, excuse me, exceeded our operating revenues by $325,000. This looks a little different than what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing about $1 million. This is due to some adjustments at the year end that are required for financial statement reporting. So it's not actually a cash outlay, it's just a financial adjustment. You'll see the fringes are a notable line item on that. They look like a negative, but that's the accounting adjustment that we had to make for the year. So we ended the year with about $1 million more in revenues than we expected. As I've noted throughout the year, this is largely due to increasing our reimbursement for the SOAR program to more closely match our expenses and the returns we've seen in our reserve and investment account. Combined, those came in at about $295,000, higher than expected at the beginning of the year. Operating expenses for the year are showing under budget by $484,000, but like I just said, much of that is due to accounting adjustments that had to be made in June. As far as cash outlay for operating expenses, we came closer to $20,000 to $30,000 under budget, so pretty much hitting the target. For levy receipts, there was no change from last month. We ended the year with $8.8 million in levy receipts, and that's an 8% increase over 2023. So it was very helpful to us for the year.
Are there any questions of Jessica on the financial statements? Appreciate the report. Anybody have any comments or questions? If not, we will accept those, and they'll be attached to the meeting minutes for future reference, and we'll move on to item number 7.
Sure. So this month, actually, or in June, we received an invoice from the Kanawha County Emergency Ambulance Authority for $135,000 attributed to the purchase of an ambulance. I'll go over this and explain the scenario, and then I believe, I'm not sure if Tracy Surface with the Ambulance Authority is online, or I should say her here in person. Back in 2017, there was an agreement made between KRT and the Kanawha County Emergency Ambulance Authority in relation to the safety levy that passed. It was an agreement that KRT would purchase an ambulance for the Ambulance Authority for 6 years and 6 fiscal years in a row. That agreement expired in June 30th of 2023. So on July 1st, 2024, the agreement was null and void. And we received this invoice from the Ambulance Authority. I reached out to the Ambulance Authority to let them know that the agreement we had expired. And that agreement also has specific language that says KRT shall not be obligated to make any funds not requested by KCAA in any given fiscal year available in any future year. I let Monica at the Ambulance Authority know, but also said I would give the benefit of putting it on the agenda for the board, because this is not in our budget for the year, as that fiscal year had passed. So when Jessica makes her budget, she didn't include the $135,000. But for the sake of our partnership with KCAA, I wanted to make sure we put it on the agenda for the board to discuss.
Have board members been here long enough to remember that resolution from 2017? Bob, you probably
I
have.
do.
It was an agreement that was reached at a point in time that they were severely short of funds. And it was an effort to recognize that we worked together with them. And we diverted some of the safety levy money that was due to the authority to buy an ambulance for them. I don't know anything other than what Sean has just read and told us about the current circumstances, but we're outside of the life limit of that agreement.
Yeah, and so
Is there anybody here from the ambulance authority to present?
I was getting, Monica said that Tracy Surface would potentially be here or online, but Travis is saying she's not online either. The reasoning I was given was that it was for fiscal year 2022 that an invoice was not made for an ambulance, and I was told that that year the ambulance authority had enough time procuring an ambulance due to COVID, etc.
Okay.
I don't remember everything about it, but I know there was a reason we put a sunset clause on that.
Well, it corresponded with the levy,
Yeah.
with the term of the levy. We would be, whatever payment we'd be making right now, particularly without them to argue as to why they should receive it and we should make it, would be out of the goodness of our hearts. We adopted a deficit budget, I will point that out.
Yeah, I think I'm of the opinion that since the contract has expired, no one from the authority is here to speak to that, that you should not approve that invoice, payment of that invoice. I'll make that a motion. We need a motion.
Does that need to be a motion, or can we just not take action on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody feel differently? Valerie has put an opinion out there.
Did I go over that again? I think I understood what she said.
Can you?
Just don't do anything.
Yeah, that's, yeah. And I don't think we need a motion, it's just for discussion.
And it doesn't, maybe the ambulance authority would have some perspective that they'd like to present to us, but without hearing that, I think Valerie's probably correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So that concludes 7A, unless there's any other comments on it. Old business, insurance report.
Jacob's gonna do his best Kurt imitation today. Kurt's at the Public Transit Association conference up in Stoke.
We had 2 new claims last month. 6/11, one of our buses was up on the west side hill, and the bike rack was deployed, and it clipped a telephone pole making a turn up there, and one of the passengers has claimed injury from that incident. And then on 6/20, out in South Ridge, one of our buses was stopped there near Target, and a vehicle came out, pulled out, hit our bus. Not our fault, but a couple of passengers are claiming injury due to that accident. Those are the only 2 new incidents from June.
Did anything get resolved on our list?
Not that I know of. No.
Okay.
Still ongoing.
Okay. So I think you're up next on the CAT operations report.
So in June, we saw another decline in ridership. There was a total of 88,000 rides with a 6% decline from the previous June. At one-time percentages, the passengers per hour, the revenue hours stayed the same from previous months. Down the bottom left, the SOAR program, for the total fiscal year received $1.5 million, with 155,000 being in June. And then on the far right there on the bottom, the transit app, finished out the year strong with 7,700 rides in June being utilized from the transit app. And the downloads, the number of sessions continued to increase month to month there.
So if we look at that transit app section of the right-hand column under sessions, that's the number of what?
So 121,000 times in June, passengers opened up the transit app to utilize it.
And did something to affect the ride, or they just had to look at it?
Could they look at it? It could be that they planned their trip, they used it to pay their fare. It could be multiple things.
Okay.
And That's all I have for the operations report.
Nothing on operations report two.
On two, wasn't much change, everything stayed the same.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions of Jacob on operations? Now the item that I suspect people are here to hear about, I8C, which is the comprehensive operational analysis.
Yeah, so we'll take a promotional break where I want to brag on something. Can you pull up those pictures? You have them on there. At our budget hearing this year, we talked about the concept of doing more trainings at KRT. I'm super proud of this picture and then the next one. It's going on even today, right, Chris?
Yes.
3 days this week. Gillig was in here. It's the first training of our mechanics in person by our outside entities in the last, I want to say, 15 years going on. So our mechanics are in there getting the most up-to-date training on our buses. Really proud of that, and I appreciate the board making that possible for us. So that was really important to me, and now I'll get into, again, as Todd said, what we're here to talk about. I'm going to go over a presentation, and it's a modified version of what I presented at the last public hearing. I also think that it'll be helpful for Mr. Anderson, who's coming on board. You're going to get a little bit of history of KRT and who we are, what we do. We're going to talk about this comprehensive operational analysis, why we did it, what we've learned from the analysis. We're going to talk about the proposals for fare changes. We're going to talk about our on-demand services, and we're also going to talk about the proposed service recommendations for our fixed route buses. So who are we at KRT? You know, there are 159 total employees. So you think KRT, you think bus drivers. Well, we do have fixed route operators, but that makes up just a portion of it. We also have on-demand paratransit drivers who offer services for individuals who qualify for that paratransit service. They also provide, we call it SOAR, which is the State Opioid Response Service, where we take individuals to substance abuse recovery treatment. And that makes up the bulk of that 92 individuals. We have 34 maintenance employees who operate 24/7, 365. There's not a minute that you drive by KRT here at 4th and Stockton, there's not someone working in the garage for us to keep these buses running. And then 33 administrative staff, that's from dispatchers, street supervisors, management, etc. So, and then the 13 board members, you all around the table, that is you. And so what do? We're not just bus service here. Yes, we do. We move almost 1 million people a year with our fixed route bus service. We also do that paratransit service I talked about. The third item there is really important for the county. We manage the county's fuel program. So we have tanks back here in the back corner of our lot. We also have 2 different locations, Nitro and Marmette, where we also fuel up and do bulk deliveries. And there are it's about 100 different partner agencies who fuel through our program. So what that means is that Kanawha County Senior Services, the Sheriff's Department, the Ambulance Authority, you name it, the Assessor's Office, they come through KRT to get their fuel. We also are able to negotiate better fuel prices by coming together as a conglomerate and putting that out to bid every 2 years. So that's another service that KRT offers.
What was the savings last year on that program that we passed along?
Oh, it was dramatic. I don't have it right in front of me.
$1 million?
It was over $1 million. During the spike in COVID, when fuel was at extreme highs, we were so thankful for that contract. We saw other transit agencies across the state that were paying market price, and they were paying $5 a gallon, and we're right now at $2.37 for diesel. Gases.
I think gas is $2.37, diesel's higher, just a couple cents higher.
So it's dramatically paid off for us, and not just us, but all of our partners across the county and the city. So the fourth item you see here, perform emergency evacuations. Thankfully, we don't do many of these, and we want to keep it that way, but when things go wrong, terribly wrong, and you need to move a lot of people really fast, transportation is a real issue. So when it comes to flooding, or it comes to, you name it, the softball team broke down on the interstate, we moved them. We move people, and we do it quickly, and our team on our evac team does a tremendous job of at moment's notice dropping what they're doing and showing up to help. And then public service charters, you notice the entirety of the regatta or the Tour de Cole in St. Albans, different events around the county. We like giving back to those citizens who do pay that safety levy, so that when they have an event in their community, KRT shows up. We'll be at a Christmas parade. We think it's important that people see us. We think it's important that kids see us. We think that it's important that people who may not use our bus service, they do get on our vehicles when it comes to a sporting event or the regatta or some type of entertainment event across the county. We want to be seen, and that's why I put that up there. All of those things, they cost money. You all pass a budget every May, and it adds up. So the majority, in every single year, this obviously costs more from labor. We think, the best operators and team in the state, and we're going to pay them accordingly. And you see the fringe benefits, services, materials and supplies, utilities, every single thing on that table gets more expensive each year. So when we look at $17 million is the budget that we passed this year. And the next slide you see here tells us exactly how we pay for that. 55% of our budget comes from the Kanawha County Safety Levy. So we're extremely thankful that we're able to go out and get the citizens of Kanawha County to help pull that off for us. And then we also receive about 22% from federal grants, so that's FTA, when they give us operating grants. Those are traditionally allocated based off of formulas, so it's ridership, it's population, et cetera, which in recent years has been tough. Given declining population and a declining ridership, that means that your formula grants also decline accordingly. So that's something to keep in mind as we look towards the future. The number that's getting bigger there is the state opioid response. So it's making up 10% of our revenue. That's a huge program for us. That's the SOAR monies through DHHR, where we take individuals to substance abuse recovery treatments. The scary thing about that number is that 10% of our budget every year is up in the air. We have conversations with DHHR on whether or not that funding will be maintained. And I always put an asterisk beside that, because I don't want our board to become reliant upon that money, because it could at any point go away. It's not a permanent line item, and that's a concern for us. And then you see investments. I'm excited that our investment numbers are higher than they have been in prior years, and that's thanks to you all putting that RFP out and having our teams come in and look at how we invest our short-term and long-term funds. And then you see the state contributes $253,000 to us, and then we receive some funding through charters, which totals about $15.7 million. So the slide before, Travis, I think you can show it here, $17 million in a budget. Go back, sorry. Yeah, one more. $17 million budget, $15.7 million in revenue. This is what we're talking about, is this $1.3 million deficit. How do you maintain a level of service that our passengers are used to and that they deserve, while living within the reality that we are $1.3 million in the red, and that number is going to get bigger every single year. So to the next slide there, that's where we started talking about this comprehensive operational analysis. How do we maintain reliable, consistent, convenient service across KRT while adjusting and recognizing our budget realities, what we have to live within. And we started this, if you all recall, late 2022. This hasn't been a quick process. It's taken us a tremendous amount of time to go through the data, to do surveys, to talk with our operators, to talk all these different scenarios out. And what did we see? What did we learn? Well, money isn't everything, but it is a big indicator of what's working and what's not working. And you'll see here on the left portion of this slide here, this $15.10 cost per passenger trip. An efficient public transit entity tries to keep that number around $4 to $5 per passenger. We're hovering up at about 3 times that. That indicates, hey, there's a problem. And it's tough, because look, we do go 2.1 million revenue miles. Kanawha County is a big county. We're spread out. We're not all right here in Charleston. We're at every corner of the county, and we've done a tremendous job of reaching out there. But when that middle number, the ridership, isn't as high, it obviously brings that average cost up. And you see Tri-State down in Huntington there at $8, Fayetteville is 4.54. So you can get there, and there are other transit entities that do operate at that efficiency, and that's what we strive to do. And on the right, on this right chart, what this indicates is average daily ridership for our different fixed route lines. What you quickly notice is that there are 4 lines, the St. Albans, Nitro, Montgomery, and the Kanawha City or the Cabin Creek line, that make up about 85% of our ridership. So about 85% of the million, so 850 out of a million passengers, 850,000 out of a million passengers are on those 4 routes. That's really important to us. It also indicates to us that we need to maintain that service, and that's very important to us. All right, guys. This slide here, this is a neat technology we have with our APCs. They're automatic passenger counters. Jacob knows, but we install these on our buses, and what they do essentially is when you walk on the bus, it triggers a laser that keeps a count, and it says, hey, Jacob got on the bus in Bell at 8:45 a.m. And it also tells when someone gets off the bus. It doesn't know it's Jacob, but it knows individual, it counts individual stops. And we're able to create this map where it literally tells us, hey, so-and-so, this is how many people get off per day at each of these stops. And it paints a picture for us of where passengers are getting on and off. And we've traditionally known that by talking to drivers. Our operators know where people get on and off the bus, but it's interesting to see it generated for us, and we use that as part of our decision-making process. All right, so the feedback from Kinley Horn, and again, this was the proposal from the consultant that evaluated our data, looked at per passenger costs, et cetera. And these are not the proposals. We're going to talk later about the proposed options, but I wanted to show this to kind of show you line by line what we're talking about. When we said it was $15.10 per person, there are some routes that are efficient. Again, those 1, 2, 3, those routes that carry the bulk of our passengers are much closer to that target number, in City Park, et cetera. But you see some outliers. You see South Hills at $33 per person. Every time someone gets on the bus in South Hills, it costs us $33. We got a lot of feedback from our public hearing where they said, hey, why are you looking at 2022 numbers? Let's talk, it's 2024, let's talk new numbers. So Travis, what we did was we went back and looked at the ridership from 2023 and 24. And what was interesting to us is that all of those routes that we talked about potentially being discontinued had a decline in ridership, while the routes that we talked about adding service to, you see an increase in 2024 from 2023 numbers. And that's the same, the next slide, you're going to see the same exact thing repeated again, where you see an outlier there with Fort Hill at $33, and then you'll see in the next table that ridership declined in every single one of those routes that we talked about potentially discontinuing. Okay, so to the next slide here, this is a little bit of change of topic and something I think that's easy to grasp, and I don't anticipate any issues with this. These are fare recommendations. We looked and we said, okay, how much does it cost to ride the bus at KRT? And so the recommendations we received were to keep the $1.50 standard fare, to update our structure for multi-ride passes. That's this concept that, well, it teams up with the third thing here, which is this fare capping concept that I'll go over. The one-day pass going from $2.50 up to $3.50, so that's an extra $1 if you do get the one-day pass. But the interesting thing there, that last row, is the 31-day pass. So the month pass, which traditionally has been $60, we're saying let's make that $50 to encourage our passengers who do utilize our service on a daily basis to save some money. They're the individuals who are using our service. They need that, and it's important to us that we can help make it easier to ride the bus for them. And the third topic, and why I underlined that, is this concept of fare capping. That is a new trend in public transportation, and it's only been available once transit entities have gone to this mobile ticketing platform where they have these smart cards where they can keep track of, if Bob's riding the bus, how much money he has loaded on his card, et cetera, how much he has spent individually that month. And what fare capping will do is, in a day, in a 24-hour period, you would not be able to spend more than $3.50 with KRT. It would cap your fare once it gets to $3.50. If in a 31-day period you spend $50, the next time you go to swipe your card to buy a ticket, etc., it would be $0 because KRT capped what you could spend. Because the sad story is you have people who, at the beginning of the month, they can't pay the $60. So what do? They pay the $2.50 every single day, or they pay, and it adds up, and it ends up hurting them in the long run. We don't want to do that to individuals at all. We don't want to make them pay $3.50 a day. come the 31st day, they paid way more than if they would just paid the $50 at the beginning of the month. So it's a new concept, it's a passenger-friendly concept, and we also talk about maintaining cash ticketing options. We don't anticipate in the near future going cashless. That's a tough transition, it takes time. There are plenty of individuals that ride our bus that rely on cash as their currency. The nice thing is that we have transitioned to this mobile ticketing option also, which allows individuals to use credit cards or their phones, etc. So this recommendation is for the fare, and we don't have any alternatives for the fare recommendations. But I want to at least put this up here in front of the board today. And we'll circle back. At the end of this presentation, we'll circle back to 3 different topics: the fares, the fixed route, and the on-demand services. So, all right, Travis. So, on-demand services. Another thing we looked at with this comprehensive operational analysis was, are there ways, what else can you do in a world where we pass a budget that is pretty set in stone based off the service we have? How do you save money at KRT? Are there alternatives out there to make our dollar potentially go further? And it's where we've seen some interesting developments in technology and concepts across not just the United States, but across the world. Individuals who are adopting this on-demand transit scenario. So what is it? If you understand Uber or Lyft or a rideshare component, it's an app where you get on here and you say, hey, I need to be picked up and I need to be taken to the doctor's office, the grocery store, wherever you're going. Instead of an Uber coming to pick you up, a KRT vehicle comes and picks you up. Takes you to either the fixed route line. We still want to push people to our bus lines. That's the most efficient use of this service. But you can also travel in zones, and we'll go over some scenarios here. But what you're seeing in front of you is the KRT Plus app, which is what we have branded our version of on-demand transit. This app is what we've been using to operate our paratransit service for the past year. Yeah, a little more than a year. So individuals who qualify through CAT and who book rides with CAT, our team that schedules those behind the scenes have been using this service. So we've done a soft launch, you could call it, of the software, and we've been working on that. And the passengers have had great feedback for us on this system. They didn't necessarily notice a difference, which is exactly what we wanted. If they wanted to embrace the technology in the app, they can, but if they want to call in and schedule their ride just like a year before, they can do it that way also. So we've had a great adoption of the on-demand transit. And so what we said was, okay, well, if we can pull this off with the CAT service, what if you transition this to all individuals in the zones across Kanawha County using the same service? So we'll go to the next slide here and talk about, go back, Travis, real quick. At a board meeting a few months ago, the board approved a pilot project to bring 3 zones online with this on-demand transit. Late August, August 26th, we're going to launch in these 3 zones. And the next slide, I'll explain what it's about. But these 3 zones here, West Charleston, East Charleston, and South Hills, are going to be our first zones for on-demand transit. They have to start near here at KRT, and what's going to happen is as we see demand and as we learn how many employees, how many vehicles, etc., we need, that's when you start kind of expanding out like spokes on a wheel and expanding towards the outlying areas of Kanawha County. Go ahead, Travis. So what is on-demand transit and what does it look like? We're talking about, for the pilot, we're talking from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but it's a 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. service with smaller vehicles. That could be potentially something as cost efficient for us as a van, a hybrid van, etc., something that gets much better gas mileage. Doesn't necessarily have to be an ADA vehicle. We will have enough ADA vehicles in our fleet to ensure that if someone requests on that app, hey, I need a wheelchair lift, or if they call in and say, hey, I need a wheelchair lift, we can provide them those vehicles. But that's where we get a lot of cost savings. Also, 30-minute wait time. You ask for a ride, within 30 minutes you get picked up and dropped off there. So next slide, Travis. Yeah, so there are 3 different options when it comes to the KRT Plus and on-demand transit, and it was really important at our last public hearing that I explained those in a way for our passengers to understand, because it sounds scary from the beginning, and you say, hey, I don't want another app that makes it as expensive as Uber or Lyft to get to where I'm going. What we are trying to do, again, is this option 1 up here, KRT Plus to a fixed route. This is where we will pick you up and take you to a fixed route. You still pay the same $1.50 if you rode the bus. In the past, it was $1.50 to get on the bus and to wherever you were going. It's the same exact cost. But we also talk about same zone travel. So when you're in a, and I'm going to show you the map here in a moment. When you're in a zone, if you want to get from one point in the zone to another point in the zone, it's the same. It's $3 to $5. And then the third option is this point of interest travel. This is where we talk any zone being picked up, and you're picked up here at 4th and Stockton, and you're taken to the airport. We know the airport is our first POI. We anticipate in the future more of those coming up, areas that people from all different zones want to get to. And that does cost a little bit more. So if you want to get picked up and taken somewhere outside your zone, like the airport, $10 to $12. We anticipate this as a way of collecting revenue from individuals who historically are never going to ride KRT. They've got the car, they don't need it, they're not going to ride our service. Maybe they will save on some parking, or they don't have a friend to pick them up at the airport, so they download our app or they call in and say, hey, pick us up at the airport. Option 2 is the scenario of, hey, I need to get across town pretty close, but I don't want to walk. Maybe the weather's bad, etc. Maybe I've been at a restaurant and I don't want to drive home and risk it. So you take a KRT home. This is opening, options 2 and 3 are opening the door for us to attract new ridership, new revenue that we have never collected in the past. And option 1 is doing what we do best, is taking care of our passengers who rely on transportation to get them for the same exact price from point A to point B. Travis, can you pull up the remix map? A tool we've utilized through this entire process is called Remix, and it works hand in hand with the VIA platform, which is what we use our on-demand service, or what provides our on-demand service. This, what you see right in front of you is the map of the pilot project. It's also what we're calling phase 1. We anticipate that as our on-demand service comes online, and as we understand the ridership and the demands, and again, back to the vehicles, employees, how many we need, this service will expand. But again, we start down here with the West Side, Charleston Core, South Hills, University of Charleston. Jacob's done a great job partnering with UC to make sure that their students can utilize this service. Students at UC will be able to go, where would they all be able to go?
There's 3 zones, and also Canal City and South City.
Yep. And so I appreciate UC for working with us through that kind of during this pilot. So this is the pilot stage and stage 1, and then Travis, if you go to stage 2, what you notice is we keep expanding, right? So some of these areas, the Wirtz area, Elkview, South Charleston, Southridge are added in phase 2. I can't tell you on a calendar when that can happen. I can tell you that we're not going to push ourselves to go faster than what we can actually accomplish. There's no benefit to that. If we were to open up all these zones at once and you had 200 people asking for a ride, it wouldn't work, right? Because they would say your wait time is 4 hours, and people would say, oh, I'm never using this again. But if we scale up and learn how many people we need, and we slowly onboard these different areas, now when 200 people ask for a ride, we've got the vehicles to make that happen, and we've got the experience to make it happen. So that's phase 2, and then phase 3, you notice brings on Cross Lanes, Nitro, St. Albans, Dunbar, North Charleston, I believe wasn't on the first one. These micro, or you call it micro transit, you call it on demand, you call it KRT Plus, which is what we have branded it as. This is the scenario, and zoom in, Travis, if you would, to the, just anywhere really. Go to where we are now. Good, okay. So 3 different scenarios I talked about. If you are, can you turn on the fixed routes? You know how to do that?
Yep.
Okay, Travis is gonna turn on the bus line. I had him off for the time being, but, okay. So if you are, we're at 4th and Stockton right here. Now, so let's say zoom out, Travis. Let's say you're up on the hill. You're up here on Beach Avenue, and you want to get to the fixed route. You're going somewhere else. You pay the $1.50. The vehicle picks you up. There has to be a buffer. If you live right next door to the fixed route, we're not going to pick you up and drive you there. That's not going to work. But if you are somewhere far enough away, we'll come pick you up, take you to the fixed route for the same $1.50 that you currently ride the bus. That's really important. For our passengers who are in these zones, if you ride the bus today, it's still the same exact cost if your final destination is the bus line. But let's say you live at Beach Avenue and you want to get down to Kroger. and you want to get picked up and taken straight there. That's that $3 to $4 option too, which is if you're in the same zone, you can get somewhere else in that same zone. Okay, you can't get over here for that $3 to $4 because that's a different zone. And over there to the west is a different zone. But if you're in the same zone, it's $3 to $4. But if you zoom back out, if you want to start here on Beach Avenue and make it to the airport, it's that $10 to $12 option. So 3 different options that cover 3 different needs from our citizens, but again, also opens us up to new revenue streams as time moves on. Okay, Travis, let's get back to our presentation. On the next slide, we're going to get into the bulk of talking about fixed route potential changes. So one common theme of our fixed route proposals for you all is this: to standardize the hours. We're talking of, right now, different routes have different times, and passengers are forced to learn their times, but it's a complicated system where we can't just say, hey, everything starts at this time and ends at this time. It's all across the board. So we are proposing standardizing those hours. We're talking about a 30-minute weekday frequency on high demand routes. So those are the 1, 2, and 3, those routes that we said 85% of our passengers are on. We want to make sure that we have a 30-minute weekday frequency, improve our evening frequency, and then improve our coverage routes. So 14, 17, 19, 21, 22. All of our scenarios that we're going to talk about today anticipate these 4 different things happening. The next slide is going to be, this is the proposal from Kinley Horn. So this is our consultants who evaluated the data. They said, here are the suggestions we have for you. They too suggest a pilot project for the KRT Plus, and that's where we talk about those 3 zones. It's a free service. We're not changing any bus routes during that pilot project. So the lines to South Hills, Beach Avenue, etc., those still exist, but the option to passengers is still there starting August 26th. Phase 1 talks about South Hills and Beach Avenue converting to KRT Plus exclusively. So the fixed routes aren't there, they're serviced by the on-demand service. And those are the same 3 zones that existed in Phase 1. And then Phase 2 talks about, and what you're slowly going to see here is as the zones for on-demand grow, the fixed routes that were serviced by those zones, the underperforming fixed routes, convert into on-demand. So the fixed routes aren't there, but the on-demand service takes over. And that's where you talk about Elkview, Northgate, Wirtz, South Park, Port Hill, are replaced by the 8 zones that get added in Phase 2. And in Phase 3, takes Tyler Mountain, Cross Lanes, Clendon, Campbell's Creek, Sissonville, and converts those over to KRT Plus. And this service, the savings proposed with this concept is $1.7 million. This is the scenario that was proposed at our public hearings. This is what, when you looked at that chart that had the 11 different routes that were proposed to be discontinued, that's what we're talking about. It was also doubling our service on Sundays, and what else am I leaving out, Jacob?
It increases the busiest routes to every half-an-hour service, which is a point, and every hour to the furthest point.
Exactly. So the routes that we saw the tremendous amount of ridership on, we said, hey, let's increase those. And the ones that we saw the inefficiencies with, we said, let's service them with KRT Plus as opposed to the fixed route lines. So that's the option from Kinley Horn, our consultants. It was very data driven. It's a high level looking at what dollars and cents, ridership, making proposals based off that map that showed, hey, this is where people get on and off the bus and where they don't go. So what happened in the meantime? Well, we had a 5-week public comment period. We received 469 surveys and 336 comments. I emailed those out to the board, so if you had time to read through them. I can't say enough about how much I appreciate the public's feedback on this. It's gone a long way in letting us know how they feel about this. Obviously, our passengers would prefer the system to stay the same. Again, it's impossible to maintain the same service with revenue that's a shortfall there. So the constant theme we got from our passengers was, hey, can you cut back some and still reach your goals without making drastic changes such as converting 11 fixed routes to on-demand? And we listened to that, and Jacob, and I give credit to him and his team, have spent a lot of time looking at, okay, what are some potential alternatives? I want to go over 2 of those today. Travis, the next slide here. This is much easier to understand. The first scenario was complicated. It was taking fixed routes, converting them to on-demand in 3 different phases that eventually left you with 11 fixed routes that are no longer there that are now on demand. This service, much easier to understand. Still doing the on-demand in the 3 phases, so you still get to that same end map eventually. But the change here is, instead of taking those routes and eliminating them or converting them to on-demand, we're saying, okay, the routes that were in the red that we said could go away, what if we scale back instead of eliminating them? And so you'll see that all those routes that were, the 11 routes that were talked about being completely eliminated, what if we do half the trips there? And then the big change too was eliminate Sunday service. We're one of 2 transit entities that has Sunday service in our system. There's a huge cost associated with that. And so this scenario would essentially, Sunday service doesn't happen, Saturday service becomes those routes 1, 2, 3, 21, and 22, so those extremely busy routes, they still operate on Saturdays. And then you see those routes that are essentially cut in half. If I say that, you can see them up there on the screen. Those are all those routes that were potentially up for being discontinued in the option 1. So option 2, we see more cost savings, 1.9 million. So that's substantial. It's also, I think, a little bit easier for our passengers to digest, which is, hey, there's not service on Sundays. Everyone keeps their routes. They're just, instead of operating 8 times a day, they operate 4 times. And we will do that based off of the ridership data when are people most on the bus, right? And what that should do is, in time, it should lower, more people will be on the buses when they do run, and then in turn, that will decrease that cost per passenger down to those numbers that we're looking, the targets we're looking to get to. So that's option 2. Option 3 it is the same as option 2, except we keep Sunday service, okay? Sunday service costs us about $600,000 a year. So this savings would be 1.4 million as opposed to the, what was the 1.9 for the last one. So both of those kind of operate the same, except again, option 3 keeps Sunday service, and option 2 would eliminate Sunday service, but also get us a little bit safer in future years when it comes to these scenarios. So again, option 2 and 3 came out of feedback from passengers, public hearings, the individuals who came out and said, hey, we understand if you need to cut back some, but please don't take it all from us. It also, options 2 and 3 leave the door open for us to continue to evaluate this. We need to do a better job as KRT and as a board also of our transit system should be fluid. It's unfair to our passengers that every 10 or 15 years we come out with changes. That's not the way public transit should work. We should evaluate on a constant basis what's working, what's not working. And you go both ways. You add service to the areas that need it and demonstrate ridership, and then you also adjust and modify areas that aren't. And so that's one thing we've learned through this whole scenario is moving forward, KRT will be much more liquid when it comes to these proposed changes. And if you have these proposed changes every several months, they become much easier to digest and you get much better feedback from our passengers. So I talked a lot, but really what we're considering are 3 different options. One is option 1 again, Travis can get back, is to essentially replace 11 routes with on-demand transit over the course of 3 different phases. And it's also to beef up those high-performing routes. It saves us about 1.7 million. Option 2 is to eliminate Sunday service. Instead of converting all of those 11 routes to on-demand, they're in half, they're halved, and the on-demand still happens, which will give us an interesting scenario where maybe we watch with data that, hey, people are using the on-demand in those areas. They're not riding the bus in the South Hills anymore because they know they can get picked up and taken somewhere. We can at least let that play out with data and let our and not completely uproot our passengers' way of getting to work and, you know, everywhere they go. So with that being said, these are the three options. I can speak more to them or answer questions. And again, these aren't the only three options. I want to express that also. The board's not mandated to take any action. These are three options we feel we've spent a lot of time internally looking at. How do we make this as painless as possible? Understanding it will be painful. But I kind of open it up to the board to discuss more.
Sean, option 3 and option 2.
Yes, sir.
How many, what's the Sunday? What's the ridership on Sunday, the cost of the ridership on Sunday versus?
Yeah.
Must be quite high because you're cutting $500,000 out.
Yeah, so the cost of Sunday ridership is around $600,000 a year. Yeah.
You know what it is per person?
So we do about 900 trips a day on Sundays. So you know, if you assume people were at least riding twice, possibly 3 times a day, so you're looking at 300 to 400 people a day.
Well, that's a lot more
600,000.
people than I thought. I didn't realize you had
6
that
million
many
divided
people.
by, say 400 people.
6,000.
I don't need to know that.
Yeah, but it's-
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
That many people ride.
it's a substantial, you know, the interesting thing too, Bob, about option 2 and option 3, that we didn't, internally, we were looking at what is the again, the most painless way of asking passengers to adapt. One benefit out of this that we didn't anticipate was, we've had trouble since COVID of attracting talent here. And one of the first things you do when you come here to KRT as a new employee, because we do our markups and our schedules based on seniority, is when you start here, you work Saturdays and Sundays, and you work Saturdays and Sundays for sometimes what, 15 years, etc. To get to a point where you can be off on weekends, right? That's something you earn here through seniority. Scenario 2 creates a world where our operators have Sundays off and require 14 less operators on Saturdays. It was an unanticipated, I feel, and I wouldn't want to speak for our operators, but a win of individuals who won't necessarily have to work weekends, or it won't take them the 15 years to get weekends off. That's kind of an unintended thing there, and I don't want to lean on that but that's kind of a win for employees also, and a win for passengers as far as not in their, you know, losing routes. That's a good question.
Definitely, you have some people here. What do you feel about this Sunday?
I work on Sundays, I work in Southbridge.
I need to get places on Sunday, and I can't get anywhere without KRT. So think about me being stuck at home.
Oh, trust me, I've.
And I
tried
live-
a lot.
I
I
live
tried to-
walking.
I actually thought, well, one day I was gonna do that. I was gonna ride the bus, no matter where I went. Well, I couldn't leave the house. So I know exactly what you're up against. And if that's your transportation, you need it. You need it. You need it badly. So we realize
And
that.
it's a health factor, because I'm 79 years old, I've had 2 heart attacks, and I need to be able to get out and socialize every day. I need to be able to get to doctor, dentist, grocery store. Sundays count. I mean, I walk to church and get a ride home, but other than that,
Well, I'm the same age. You got me by 1 heart attack. You got one on me. I don't want one, another one, but,
I don't want to compete on that.
I don't either.
So I have a question with, on 2 and 3, when it says for the KRT plus proceed as described in the
Yeah.
COA option.
Yes.
Does that mean just adding in it gradually, or does it mean, it doesn't mean replacing them, right?
Correct. It means the 3 phases, so that the maps that Travis pulled up there.
KRT plus would be added in on
Yeah,
top of.
Exactly. That still has to happen organically on its own based on demand, so those phases will still happen over time throughout all 3 options. We anticipate the on-demand service being successful, but again, it's going to take the time to understand it. That will be the same on all 3 options.
And would the on-demand service operate on Sunday?
if they're not fixed route service, the on-demand would not operate either, because the on-demand doesn't work as a replacement for fixed route. It helps when it is transporting people to the fixed route, so it would be almost impossible. Yeah. We thought about that, but it wouldn't work.
And what it will do, Heidi, is allow us to evaluate if people are willing to go over to the plus service, and we see a drop in the fixed route ridership, which would be the best case scenario, because it's telling us that people are adopting that as an option, and see it as a viable way to use the system. And that speaks to the idea that we need to do this more frequently than 5 or 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
How would folks feel, I mean, this is sort of the first time we're really discussing this option 2, option 3, about forming a committee to delve more deep into some of the merits of option 2, option 3, come up with some questions that we might have, and do a little bit more of a thorough evaluation. How do you guys feel about that?
That's probably a good idea, because it's just too much to try to figure out, and I'm sure they're just as confused as some of us are. It's a lot to absorb. I don't mean it that way. We know what's going on, we just don't know what's going on.
And there's probably lots of questions that board
Yeah.
members would have that
Yeah.
Jacob can't be put on the spot in a meeting and keep running numbers, but if he has advance notice about what those questions are, he can be prepared with, well, what if this happened, or what if that happened, to fine tune it.
It's like a firefighter, when they get a call, they have a general idea, but they don't know what's going on until they get there.
Yeah.
I do have to applaud those board members that came to the public hearings. I went to both. I know several were at both, a lot were at the library. Sean did a super job of presenting that day. The first day did not go quite as well, and I think that it really speaks to the work, one, the feedback, and secondly, the work that the administration has done to get us to a point that it's not quite the uproar as they want. Recognizing that the public wanted input, but they didn't know what to provide input to until we provided some scenario of what it might look like. It was a proposal that was very scientific and engineer-like, and didn't necessarily take into account all the public feedback. So it's important that the members were at the public hearings and also read those public comments to have that specific input, because it's very granular at that point. I am curious, Brett, did Sean share 2 and 3 with you? So you've seen those before today.
Right, we talked about it.
If the union had a preference, or do you have a preference?
It'd be something we'd have to look into. I mean, 2 was, I understand Sunday service, but it's a win-win, kind of like for everybody, because you're not getting the routes through the week cut, as opposed to option 1. That would, benefit a lot of the passengers to have service through their areas. You wouldn't have to worry about Sissonville and cross lanes and stuff like that. It would benefit the drivers as well, but like I said, y'all are the committee, so.
Well, and we want your feedback. I'm curious because the Sunday work schedule has been discussed many times.
Right.
What's the real answer on that? I don't.
Well, TTA, I mean, like I said, they don't run on Sundays. Drivers don't have no issue, they like it. But, like I said, we're KRT, we're here for the passengers, but I trying to get a medium with both, the drivers and passengers as well. Sunday service, there is people that do use it to go to church, go to work. We do have workers on Sunday, so I understand their point of view on it as well. But, I mean, like I said, it's balls in your all's court.
But if we were in a vacuum and we just had Sunday services either happening or not happening, what would your people say?
Most of my people, honestly, they would vote for the Sundays off. Because a lot of them do work, and it does take a long time to get something like that Sundays off, here.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 3 years.
Okay.
I've been here almost 5, and this was the first markup where I'm like, I might not have to work Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And he's a driver too, and he's had to work.
I've been here almost 7 years, and I can't get a weekend off. Actually, Thompson, he's been here, what, 15 years? He can't get a weekend off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and that's important. I mean, just like the passenger comments that everybody's read, is to hear from Brett about how we're affecting their lives. I think Valerie's got a valid point that this needs to be studied at a little more granular detail. I wrote down some just thoughts and comments that I have that, yeah, I mean, they can't answer in this meeting, but we need to talk about. So I don't know, does anybody have any other comments? Anybody online have any comments about where we stand? I mean, it sounds like from Valerie's perspective, and I think it's a good one, that a small board committee could look at this in a little more detail.
Is there a reason why we can't have KRT clusters?
It would depend on whether or not option 2 or 3 happens. So if option 2 happens where there's no fixed route service, it would be really hard for that $1.50 to take people. It works in that scenario because the larger group of people who need to get to the fixed route service, the $1.50 option.
You would only be able to travel within your zone essentially, or the airport.
Yeah, in your zone or the airport at that point, because the fixed route, because the system works when we're able to pick you up and take you to the closest fixed route option for the same price, but that requires the fixed route to be there. So option 3 is the microtransit, the on-demand. Just option 2. Yeah, exactly.
But those sort of questions, I feel like that might be a good reason for putting a committee together to just talk about and vet some of those.
You need a motion to put this in committee, or you're gonna do that?
That would be
in
wonderful.
executive order.
Well, I think a motion, and I'd like to have the opportunity to speak with some of those members I'd like to appoint to that committee. So if you could phrase that motion in a way to allow me the flexibility to form the committee.
Make a motion that the president select a committee to look over the options of the route changes and the price.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Sutton and a second by Ms. Gaynor. Did anybody online, or did everyone online hear that motion, and are there any comments or questions? Okay, if there's no comments or questions, call the vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And are there any opposed? Okay, and I think this shows the commitment of this board to take the time it needs to do the right thing and to take all parties into account. I appreciate your input on that and time. The banking resolution, I assume, is uneventful.
It is unnecessary because our secretary and treasurers have remained the same.
Okay. And we have our public comment period. There's 2 folks that have signed up. You'll get 3 minutes. It's Edward Woolwine and then Betty Rivard. And Travis, where should they stand so folks can hear, and it will be recorded? Should we just move this mic to the corner maybe?
Yeah, to the corner of that table.
Up here?
Yeah, and that way everybody online can hear and it'll be recorded.
Would it be okay if I put a mic on just here so I can hear you? You won't drop that in the pocket.
Oh, sure. Can everybody hear? Okay. I've ridden the bus all my life. I get what you're dealing with. My concern is, well, I had no idea about the Sunday going away possibly. I work on Sundays. There's no way I'm gonna walk Corridor G. I mean, no. And I go to DHHR, well, twice a month, 3 times a month. And I believe it was in one of your things where the cross lanes was the only one that met the 6 per hour. And it kind of, I've ridden that bus quite a bit. I feel for those people because if you take away the cross lanes, the interesting thing is you have to ride the nitro, and that's a much longer ride. And my concern is you're gonna have people that say, well, I'll just find some other way. Also on the question, no, I do not ride the city park, but how would you incorporate that? Because the 14 is paired with the 15, the South Hills. Would you put a main line route up there? How would you do that? And you're not gonna have any fixed route service in the northern part of the county. My concern about that is when you're going back to the public in the future to approve the levy, how are those people gonna react? I mean, just a thought, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And this is Betty Reward.
I've had 2 op-eds in the Charleston Gazette Mail, and I would like to be able to get those in everyone's hands if I could get an email list where I've stated my concerns. I ride the trolley almost every day and basically build my life around it. You're going to change that in phase 1 in a way that's going to totally disrupt my life. But beyond that, what I want you all to understand as board members is this is a public service. It's not just a business. In the data that you've collected, you have not collected data about how it affects people. And that's why so many people have come out to public hearings, and there's a lot more that have concerns that couldn't come out. What you need to do is find out what people need and then go to the community and get the money to address those needs. Don't assume that you have to have a flat budget. You don't have to have a flat budget. Everything is going up. Everybody understands that. People I've talked to are willing to invest in KRT if it puts people first. And that's what you need to do. And you also need to be open about your planning. You need to work with other planners. You're already working with the Capital Connector planners, but there's other planners in this city and in the county that are expanding. This isn't the time to contract because they depend on you to get people to what they're doing. It doesn't make sense. You're not in isolation. This board can't be just in isolation. And that's something that's got to change. The other thing you need to do is be upfront about your plans for a new facility. Because you're talking about taking money out of your reserve fund to put aside for that facility that hurts your ability to serve people. And once people grasp that, the press hasn't picked up on it yet, but they were here at the last meeting, they could. Once people grasp it, you're going to build a $60 million facility in 5 years. That's not going to go over too well. If you really need that facility, you need to put that up front right now and let the whole community be involved in what your needs are. This is what other entities do. This is what other public services do. You can't just work in isolation. And I think every board member, gut level, you know that. You represent cities. There's people here from the unions that aren't necessarily on the board. You represent people, and people need to be involved in what you're doing. Thank you very much. I really appreciate, I just want to say, I really appreciate your taking more time. I think that's to everyone's advantage. There's so many things pending, like the Capital Connector, like not knowing what's going to happen with Westside Kroger's. It's crazy to cut out a trolley route that takes people to West Side. And one other thing I want you to consider on the on-demand is, where do you wait? Where do I wait for that on-demand to come? I'm on a bus route. I don't need a way out. But when I want to come home, where do I wait for 30 minutes or 45 minutes? There was only one seat available at Transit Mall this morning. I can't stand up for a long period of time. I end up sitting on light posts, I mean, at curbs, it's ridiculous. You have no benches. People are so afraid of the homeless, there's no benches. In San Diego, they have cubes. We need to go to cubes. We need places to sit down.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the public comment section. The board have anything else that they need to bring before us?
I would just like to make a comment, and I appreciate all of our public comments too. I am proud of the transparency of KRT's board. Go back in time and watch. There is months and months of videos and meetings discussing our proposed facility. That's not happening in a vacuum. If you go back in time and watch those videos, you learn a lot about the plans for a new facility, which in part, without a new facility that maintains our buses, it doesn't matter what option you pick, you're not gonna have buses to run those services. So, thank you, Travis, for keeping that all up on YouTube. You can go back and watch that on your own.
We will stand adjourned.